Hey kiddies, it's Triple Feature Tuesday once again, and this week we're going to look at some Jamison Newlander horror movies. Recently, I picked up a really snazzy Blu-ray of The Lost Boys. Half because I didn't have Lost Boys on Blu-ray, half because poor Joel Schumacher died. And, it actually is a shame that Joel Schumacher died. For so long, I was just very frustrated with Joel Schumacher because even though Batman Forever is an enjoyable, if not dumb, film, Batman and Robin was really just the worst thing ever, and it just tanked everything for Batman and my love for the Batman franchise, the film franchise, for a while. And Joel Schumacher, accordingly, took the brunt of that because he put the nips on the bat suits. But it was very pleasantly surprising to look back on his filmography and see that that's really just the one movie I didn't like. There's a whole bunch that I haven't seen, but that is the only one that was that was bad. Of the ones I've seen, I've liked the majority of them, like Lost Boys, St. Elmo's Fire, Flatliners, Batman Forever, Blood Creek. There's about Joel Schumacher. Guys, Joel Schumacher wasn't that bad. But in watching Lost Boys, so I started noticing things I hadn't noticed before. Most notably, how star Jamie Gertz's character is legitimately not David Kiefer Sutherland's character's girlfriend. Go back and really watch. They only have 2 scenes together, and he only says 2 lines to her the entire time. They are just not a thing. It's kind of funny when you go back and look at it. But I also was looking at the Frog Brothers, Edgar and Alan. Edgar, played by Corey Feldman, in the first of what would be a series of films with his hetero life partner, Corey Haim. But also Alan Frog. You ever think about Alan Frog? I know I didn't for a long time. But so I looked him up. His name's Jamison Alexander, and he's been in 2 other horror movies that I just adore, that are just some of my favorite things ever. So I thought, hey, why not take a look at some Jamison Alexander horror movies? So our triple feature will be going in chronologically increasing order while simultaneously decreasing amounts of agency for Jamison. That'll be The Lost Boys, The Blob, and Bone Tomahawk. So let's start with The Lost Boys because, it's actually, I've been going back and forth and thinking about this, and you can go in either order for your first and your third movie. The second movie is always going to be The Blob, but you can either start with The Lost Boys and start with The Familiar and then build up to Bone Tomahawk, or you can start with Bone Tomahawk, arguably the best movie on this triple feature, and then go back and use The Blob and Lost Boys as kind of like a come down or comfort after the brutality of Bone Tomahawk. But because the whole thing started with me watching The Lost Boys, and that's what everybody's familiar with, we're going to watch that. So, again, Jamison Newlander plays Alan Frog. Edgar and Alan Frog. Yes, as you've guessed, the names are on purpose, but what you probably don't know is that in From Dusk Till Dawn, Quentin Tarantino named the 2 brothers, played by himself and George Clooney, as Richie and Seth Gecko, respectively, from inspiration from The Lost Boys. So it's the Frog Brothers, the Gecko Brothers. Frogs are amphibians, but I think geckos are lizards, so I don't think there's slimy, creepy crawlers in vampire movies set in the West. This is the thing. It's enough. And don't worry, I've done variations on that triple feature already before, so just go back and watch those. I'm not going to go over them again. Edgar and Alan Frog work in their parents' comic book store, which does feel like a legit comic book store in the movie, and they become Sam, Corey Haim's younger brother character, his entry into the underworld of Santa Carla's vampires. The motorcycle gang led by David, or the Michael, the older brother played by Jason Patrick's entry into the vampires for them. It's kind of fun how Sam and Michael's paths kind of parallel to certain extents in terms of making new friends, introduced into vampires, but from different angles. Edgar and Alan seem to be the only people that are consciously aware of the vampires and are, trying to get rid of them. They're young, and so they haven't really had that much experience yet, but they at least know what's going on, and they try to warn Sam, who completely ignores it until it turns out that his own brother is a goddamn shit-sucking vampire. So Jamison Newlander at this point had only made two previous films, and Corey Feldman, while he's gaining in popularity, had not become the megastar just yet. I think this was like part of it because it was like Goonies, Lost Boys, and Stand By Me all kind of came out within a year of each other and kind of cemented him as a teen heartthrobby type of guy. So Edgar and Alan are basically are on the same level the entire time. It's not like there's Edgar and a sidekick in the film. Again, we remember it a certain way because Corey Feldman became famous and Jamison Newlander did not. Like he gets as many lines as like Corey Feldman does, just like the attack of Eddie Munster, the baddest, like when they're doing like their whole little like slap five goofy bullshit later. But the advantage that I think Jamison Newlander as Alan has as opposed to Corey Feldman as Edgar is Corey Feldman is not a tough guy. He just isn't. And so you can kind of see like he's trying to like put on a tough guy role, whereas Jamison Newlander is just, I'm not going to say natural, but he gets to that vacant stare look very easily and comes off a bit more thuggy, which kind of makes him a bit more badass. But they're so adorable when like they go to the cave to go like take out the vampires and then they fail miserably because first contact with the enemy and we fail. I think that is Alan's line. They're so good, but they're so good. I mean, it's The Lost Boys. You guys know The Lost Boys. Watch it again. If you've been looking for an excuse to watch The Lost Boys again, watch it now. This is that excuse. It's such a good time still. We start here because this is Jamison Newlander at his most active. He is an action hero with all of the other characters, taking out the vampires in Santa Carla. In The Blob, he is not as interesting a character. The Blob, of course, being a remake of the 1950s film with Steve McQueen, which, man, really holds up really well. 1988 Blob, directed by Chuck Russell and written by Frank Darabont, and also that Chuck Russell. He did The Mask and Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, and also Dreamscape, and I want to say Eraser, so, dude, Chuck Russell. In the 1988 film, the Blob, as it turns out, is a government experiment in biological warfare that goes out of their control very, very quickly. The townspeople of Scheme Town, I forget what the name of it is, everybody's forced to deal with this giant amorphous blob that is acidic and eats everything and seems to be possessed of some sort of intelligence, even though you don't even know what it could possibly be. It's just a blob, and that's part of what makes it so perfect. And also just, man, the special effects in this movie hold up very well for a late 80s practical and optical effects movie. There's no CG in this thing, and yet it's just all gross and real and right there. Ugh. So, Jamison Newlander is the older brother of the main character's younger brother's best friend, who is a movie usher at the movie that the kids are not supposed to be going to. I think the movie is called Groundhog Day or something. It is a direct parody of the Friday the 13th films, and it's actually pretty funny. There's like a great line where like the teenagers in that movie see the Jason analog and they're like, wait a minute, hockey season ended months ago. And Jamison Newlander does not have a lot of agency in this. He is, doing his younger brother a favor, and so the only person he gets to boss around is the younger brother when he's saying, it's like, get your feet off of the chairs and you're going to get me in trouble, and oh man. But then the Blob shows up in the theater, which is horrifying. It's so horrifying, somebody may have already done a triple feature about movie theater death traps. And Jamison Newlander just runs away. Granted, everyone else is running away, but this could have been one of those moments where like the person puts the safety of others ahead of him, and or desperately tries to make sure his younger brother gets out alive, which he doesn't. He runs away. He kind of gets like pushed by the crowd and then keeps going with it. He goes up to like the second floor of the movie theater and sees his younger brother escape out the back, but then go down a sewer. And then the younger brother dies. Spoiler alert for a movie that's 31 years old that you still haven't seen yet, so what do you even care? And I think the last we see of him is him talking to some of the military guys, explaining like where the Blob was last seen. But I don't... When I rewatched it, I was really trying to see if he ends up in the City Hall final siege. at the end, but I didn't really notice him. He could have been in there, but I'm not sure. But as far as I know, he lives throughout the whole movie, or he lives through the movie, which is more than can be said for lots and lots of people in the Blob, which again is awesome. It's so awesome. This is actually the third triple feature that I've included the 1988 Blob. It was the aforementioned movie theater Death Traps, but then I think I also did one. It was like the son of the Blob, taking the idea of the 1950s movie and updating it because, yeah, the remake counts as an update of the other movie. I think the other two were The Stuff and Phantoms, but yeah, the Blob, so good. And then Jamison Newlander sort of drops off the face of Hollywood for about 15 years. He became a playwright and wrote a couple of well-received plays and then tried to he did finance his own movie, I think called The Rooster, that I don't know if that was popular. That was like, a good indie movie or anything like that. But then he starts popping up in movies again, and lo and behold, in looking up his IMDb page, he's in Bone Tomahawk. You remember Bone Tomahawk? The movie where Kurt Russell in his second phase cowboy mustache teams up with Patrick Wilson, Matthew Fox, and Richard Jenkins to take out a clan of cannibalistic Native Americans. The movie's amazing. It is like, I can't go into too much detail about it because you don't have an hour for me to talk about how good Bone Tomahawk is, but suffice it to say, it's amazing. And Jamison Newlander is in it. He is the mayor of the town, Bright Hope, that everybody lives in. And so after the troglodytes steal or kidnap Patrick Wilson's wife, Kurt Russell's deputy, and David Arquette, the crook / murderer that had violated their burial grounds, he was the actual target, they run off back to the cave. And so everybody meets in the saloon, the Educated Pig, I think is what it's called. Yeah, this movie's amazing. And it's basically, a central area for all the townspeople to meet because this is a frontier town. It's not that big. And Jamison Newlander plays the mayor, and he is, subservient to his overbearing wife, played by Sean Young, and who seems to be the actual power in the town. And that's why it is so well, the one scene he's in is so well written, blocked, and shot because you barely see him in the entire scene. He's got like 5 or 6 lines of dialogue, but because of the blocking, people are perpetually getting in between him and the camera, or the camera is like immediately starts moving away from him to subtly show that he is not in charge. And then you get Kurt Russell as Sheriff Franklin Hunt, who, when he's coming up with a plan and saying what they need to do, is addressing Sean Young specifically instead of the mayor, to the point where she says, "Shouldn't you be telling this to the mayor?" Because it's her husband. He's supposed to be the guy, but everybody knows what's what. And he gets like the singer or closer joke line for that scene, which is how do you spell troglodyte? For the telegram. And then the rest of the movie continues, and I gotta tell you, Bone Tomahawk. It's one of those movies that has like such a specific genre or high concept that you can't really compare it to too many other movies. But suffice it to say, it is probably just one of the best movies I've ever seen in my entire life in terms of writing, acting, plot, action. Everything hits note perfect in Bone Tomahawk, and Jamison Newlander is one of those things. And as a side note, David Arquette plays one of the pair of murdering bastards that begin the film. It's him and the late, great Sid Haig. But David, I know you watch these videos because we correspond all the time. So, David, in this movie, which is set in the 1890s, you get killed off screen by cannibals. In Ravenous, which takes place around like in the late 1840s, 1850s, you get killed by cannibals off screen. If you could just do one more, I know it's a very specific type of genre of the period piece cannibal movie, but if you would do just one more, We could have a whole triple feature party about you being murdered off screen and then presumably eaten by cannibals in the 1800s, and it would make my day. I think it would make everybody else's day. So just something to consider. But really, we're here for Jamison Newlander and his awesome contributions in 3 of my favorite horror movies: The Lost Boys, The Blob, and Bone Tomahawk. And I'll see you guys next week.